Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is John Nerrill. I help professionals who are ambitious about their careers create their next advancement opportunity. I want to welcome you to my weekly Facebook Live show, and I want to quickly introduce to you my guest today. She is an amazing performance coach, a masterful coach, and I am honored to say a dear friend. Please welcome Susan Kovacs to our show today. Hey, Susan.
Hey, John. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's such an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. You and I are going to have a great conversation today. And I know that our listeners out there are really going to benefit from your expertise and your story and what you have to share. So real quickly, as we're welcoming everybody into the room today and to the show, if you haven't had a chance, please go to my website at johnnerrill.com. There I have a free resource for you called 3 Steps to Creating Your Next Advancement Opportunity Without Feeling Overwhelmed. You simply fill out the form. You'll get a confirmation link to download the workbook, and that'll also enter you into my email community, where I email everyone 3 times a week around various topics about leadership and careers. So in addition to this episode being housed here on my Facebook page, I also edit the version just slightly, just kind of cut off the beginnings and ends to make it a little bit neater. And those are all posted on my website, in my Learning Hub, and on my YouTube channel. So without any further ado, Susan, again, thank you so much. And as we get started today, for everybody listening, just give us an introduction and a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks, John. So who I am and what I do, we could talk 30 minutes just on that. So essentially what I do is I work with high potential athletes and help them optimize their performance through mindset mastery. So looking at all of the things that are influencing their performance outside of sort of their physical skills. So that's essentially what I do on a day-to-day basis. Love it. Love the athletes that I get to work with. I'm honored to be a part of their journey. And it's I'm very blessed.
Mm-hmm. And Susan, when you talk about athletes, you're also an athlete yourself, correct?
Yes, I guess. Yeah. So I'm a triathlete.
I think we got to acknowledge that in some way, right?
Yes, I am a triathlete. I got into the sport actually when I was in my 50s. So definitely a late bloomer.
Very nice. And could you tell everyone out there a little bit, primarily, who are the kinds of athletes or types of athletes that you work with?
So I currently work with, I have a lot of different sports that I work with. However, I've got a lot of hockey players that I work with, and also a lot of track players, or track and field athletes that I work with. And I'm also now branching out into a totally different area where there's a real need, and that's working with retiring professional athletes and helping them then transition into life after their sport. There's a really huge need for that. Athletes tend to get very, caught up as a lot of professionals do, right? In whatever it is that the profession is, their identity is tied to that. So when it's time to step away, and people experience this transition as well when they're retiring from a long career, in anything as an executive, so that's one of the things that I've started to work on as well.
Nice. I'm fascinated by your work because not only do you get to work with a variety of different athletes, but when you shared earlier about mindset mastery, it really, to me, speaks volumes about how, regardless of the sport, when the mindset is there, you can help them accomplish some great things, correct?
Yeah, mindset has such a huge impact on our ability to perform. It really, really does. And the reason I got into that field specifically was based on my own experiences. and realizing, so I'll just go back and give the viewers a bit of a backstory. When I was 24 years old, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and told at that time, now granted, this was a long time ago, over 30 years ago, and things have changed, but at the time I was told by my neurologist to avoid stress, which was one of the first things, which is not that easy to do, and to not do anything to push myself physically. So I didn't. I spent 30 years, going to the gym and doing, bits and pieces here and there, but certainly not doing anything. And then when I was in my 50s, I had decided to work out with a strength coach, and she approached me and asked me if I'd ever thought about doing a triathlon. And after I stopped laughing, I said, no, I've never thought about it. But it was a really strange thing because I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's like, I wonder what it would feel like to cross that finish line. And so I had this internal struggle going on. I say it was like having a couple of 3-year-olds bickering in my head. You can't do that. You're 50 years old and you've got MS. And, and the other one was saying, you can do anything you set your mind to. And thankfully my heart won out. And after consulting with doctors and making sure that physically I wasn't going to, automatically do something or do something to harm myself, I decided to start training. So, and that's when I really realized the power of the mindset. And that's when I started doing some research. That's when I actually found IPEC, which is how you and I know each other, is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And we've both been through the program there. And that was really what started this whole journey for me. Yeah.
Susan, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was about influencers. And so could you just define for us what an influencer is?
Sure. So we look at through IPEC, there's definitely the 6 that we look at. So we look at the social influencer, the mental, the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, and the environmental. And we can go into those in a little bit of detail if you'd like. So it's really anything. So when we're talking about performance, and this as well was something that I learned through IPEC, and I share it with all of the athletes that I work with. So our performance equals our potential. So the best that we're capable of doing under ideal circumstances at that time. So that's our potential, minus any distractions. So any stress reactions that we've got going on, any distractions, anything that's taking away from our ability to perform to our best. So that could be a track athlete having to run in the rain would be an environmental influencer. So social, how well the athlete's able to communicate with their coaches, right? Whether they've got good communication, whether they've got a great support network with their family and their teammates and things like that. So if coach comes in and normally the coach says, hey, Johnny, how are you today? And gives them a high five. And one day coach come in and doesn't say anything to Johnny and just walks by with his head down. Mm-hmm. Johnny, if a social influencer is important to him, and if he values that connection with his coach, Johnny's going to maybe internalize that and interpret that to think that coach is mad at me. What did I do wrong? Right? So it could be absolutely nothing. Coach could have had a disagreement with his spouse before he got there, whatever it was, right? So things like that can definitely influence the emotional aspect of it. So looking at emotional expression is one of the things we look at, and people think that, often we're telling people not to express their emotions, and that's absolutely not it at all, because if we're not expressing them, then we're stifling them, and that's just going to lead to catabolic energy, and that's not a good situation either. But it's the appropriate expression of our emotions and having the awareness about that. And I mean, we could, as you know, we could go for hours on this. One of the stories that I talk about is it was at the World Junior, the under 20s last year, the World Junior Hockey Championships. And there was a Canada beat Sweden in the gold medal round. And I was watching this while it was going on. And one of the Swedish players, they placed the silver medal around his neck, and he promptly took it off and pitched it into the crowd.
Oh,
so
wow.
yeah, he was so upset with not winning the gold medal that he didn't want to have anything to do with the silver. So, we look at that and sure, there's emotions around it, but is that an appropriate way to express those emotions at that time? Right.
So, yeah. So piggybacking on all of that, you and I have talked previously too about this whole concept of how we show up professionally and energetically, right? So whether we're talking about how we show up professionally and energetically in the workplace, in our personal relationships, or even when we're playing a sport, I was wondering if you could talk with us a little bit more about how you weave in these concepts of showing up into some of the work that you do with your clients.
Yeah, and that is such a huge thing, is how people show up, and it's really sort of the basis of the work that we do, right? So when I'm working with my clients, it's one of the first things that we're dealing with, and one of the biggest parts about it is having an awareness. People, we so often think that things happen to us, and that we don't have we just respond or generally react, and don't realize that we can stop and respond and realize, okay, how do I want to respond to this situation? I often talk about an athlete that I worked with, and she would always show up with a lot of catabolic energy at different events, right? And in working through this and realizing that, we have a choice how we show up. Are we going to show up and want to, kill our competition?
Right.
Right. So is that the energy that we're showing up with? Or are we showing up going, you know what am I going to learn from this situation? It'd be great if we win. If we don't, there's going to be something that I'm going to learn, because every time that I don't achieve the results that I want, that's an opportunity to look back and go, okay, what can I improve on there? What didn't work well for me? How can I learn from this so that I can get to that next level that I want to go to? So there's always lessons in that as well. And I'm not sure that I answered that question, John.
No, you did, and it's given me a few more actually. And as I'm checking some of the comments here, we've got some people weighing in. So real quickly, pardon me, I'm going to pop up here. So Tony's weighing in, and he's asking, is there any impact on coaching for bowling? And so Tony, just as a quick aside, you can go to Susan's website, and I'll pop it up here as well, which is athletesgamechanger.com. And if you go to her podcast tab, she actually interviewed me a couple of weeks ago, and that podcast was recently released. And so you can hear a little bit more about how Susan interviewed me, specifically around some experiences I had out on the PBA 50 tour a couple of weeks ago, and how we talked about mindset and learning opportunities there. So I encourage you to go take a listen to that podcast, because I think that'll definitely help you. But in the moment right here, Susan, I'd like for us to talk a little bit about when you're working with athletes who play an individual sport. So whether you're working with a runner or a jiu-jitsu player, even a bowler like myself, what are some of the things that you have found to be helpful for those athletes in terms of a mindset that have helped them perform at their optimal potential?
So there's a couple of really key things that we look at, and one of the biggest ones is being present in the moment, and that's a really, really tough thing sometimes. It's easy to, think about our last shot or our last frame or whatever it was, and it's being able to let all of that go and really get into that state of flow, and not have any past thinking, not have any forward thinking, not being concerned. Because when we get into the past, then, as you know, John, that's where, there's the worry and the guilt and the second guessing and all of those things start coming into play. And that detracts from the energy that we're able to bring to our performance. And then when we get into that forward thinking, like, oh my gosh, I've got to make this shot, right? Or I'm going to embarrass myself if I don't do this, or what are mom and dad going to think, or what's my coach going to think? Again, that's adding stress to us. And as soon as we start creating that stress in our bodies, we start tensing up, right? And then, the muscles can't move the way they're supposed to move. So really just being present in the moment, trusting the process. I mean, a lot of my athletes come up with different mantras that they use, and that's, whatever that, it might be trusting the process. It might be just saying to themselves, be here now. It might be let the machine take over, but literally getting out of their heads and into the moment. And sometimes it's easier said than done. What we find is that when they're able to be really present in the moment, then that's when, we're able to get into that state of flow. Our confidence goes up when we're more present in the moment, right? Because we're not worried about things that have happened in the past. We're just focused on what it is that we're doing at that particular moment. So that's a key one. Confidence is key. And having a game plan. And that's something that we talk a lot about. No two athletes are the same. So it's easy, to say this is what somebody needs to do, but no two athletes are the same, no two people are the same, right? We all see the world through our own lenses, through our own perceptions and our values and our beliefs and our experiences and, all the things that have happened to us in our lives. So having a success formula or a plan, I have a game plan that I work through with my clients, and knowing what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And the other key part about that as well, I guess, that I'd like to just mention is that these are the skills. You need to practice these skills the same as you practice your physical skills, right? So the same as you practice, your bowling shots and the track athlete practices and the hockey player practices their shots and basketball, all of those things. These skills need to be practiced as well. You can't just show up on game day or an important day and think that you're going to be able to implement these and make them work for you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And Tony, to your comment, yeah, that's exactly why in that podcast episode I talked about putting my phone down. It was just for me to be more fully present and engaged in that moment, and to even more specifically honor the technical and mental programs that I've worked on with my coach. And Susan Roberts weighing in here as well too, and he's just saying it's all about believing in yourself and not live inside your own head, right? Would you agree?
So true. Completely. It's, believing in yourself is such a key thing. And if I can give just a quick story about something that's just happened here recently. So I'm a huge hockey fan, for anybody that doesn't know that already. So we had the Ontario Hockey League playoffs just here recently. So I live in London, Ontario. The London Knights were ahead of the Guelph Storm 3-0 in the second round of the playoffs. The Guelph Storm won 4 games straight, came back and beat London. So amazing, right?
Right.
They went into the third round of the playoffs. They were down 3-1 against the next team. They came back and they won that series. So they had faced 7 elimination games. So 7 games that they'd gone into where they could potentially be out of the playoffs, out of the season for good. And they won all 7 of those. Then they went on to the next round, played the number 1 team. They were down 2-1 there. They came away and they won that. So they won the Ontario Hockey League championships.
Wow.
If they didn't have that belief in themselves when they were down 3-0, 3-1, they couldn't have done it. Right? So, I mean, believing in yourself, and that also, we talk about confidence in the sense that we look at it and it's like, well, when I get to this point, I can be confident. When I achieve this, I can be confident, right? When you believe in yourself and believe in your abilities, confidence can be an internal thing because you know you can handle whatever's coming up for you, right? So confidence doesn't have to be tied to achieving a certain external thing. So yeah, believing in yourself, that's such a great point.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Robert and Tony, for bringing those up. I appreciate it.
Guys.
Susan, just as well, so I loved what you were saying there about confidence. Where do you see competence and cockiness playing in an athlete's mindset?
Cockiness as in arrogance?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
pardon me, making me laugh. Sorry.
And that's a great question, because it's one of those things, right? People will say, well, I don't want to be too confident because people won't like that. So cockiness and arrogance is a totally different thing in my mind. Having a quiet confidence, I think people want to be around something like that. An arrogant person or a cocky person, that's when they start to think that they're better than the other people. Mm-hmm. Right? So having confidence, you're not judging yourself against anybody else. That's who you are. You have confidence in your abilities. When it gets into arrogance and cockiness, then that's where you think you're better than somebody else, or, you start worrying about how you're performing then too, right? And if you're arrogant, you can't allow yourself to make any mistakes. Failure is just not an option for you, things like that. So it's very much that fixed mindset. Mm-hmm. Carol Dweck talks about growth mindset and fixed mindset. Yep. I find arrogance comes out more in the people that would have a fixed type of a mindset, where they think that they can't improve on their technical skills because talent is innate, and that's you get what you get type thing, right? So they don't put in hard work necessarily. And there's so many, super talented athletes that we know of and we hear about all the time that don't achieve what their talent would allow them to, because they've got a fixed mindset. So they don't put in the work necessarily. So if anybody has any more questions, please go ahead and put them in, and we'll go ahead and answer a few more. But Susan, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, when you talk about mindset mastery, how do you help athletes who are transitioning out of a sport and they go on to whatever is next for them? Can you talk a little bit about what that mindset mastery work might look like? And I'm asking you this because we all have these changes, right? We see people that go through career changes, and it's the same for athletes, right? They have a career as a professional athlete, and now they start doing something else. Or we see people who spend 20 years working in one industry, and now they shift and go into something else. So share a little bit with us about what that mindset mastery might look like in that kind of shift. Yeah, and that's a great question, John. It's one of those things, and again, very individual, depending on who it is that we're working with, right, and what their particular perceptions are about the changes that they're going through in the transition. So one of the things with athletes and professional athletes is their identity is very much tied up in who they are as an athlete, right? So the cheering of the crowd. So they have all of these challenges that they're walking away from, the adoration of the fans, all of that kind of stuff. And their identity is tied up in that, and they don't see how they can add value or create value. So that's what we're looking at, is what can they take from what they've experienced so far, and how can they use that to move forward in another area. So we're looking at, their sport has been their passion, right? And that's what gets them to where they are. So then it's digging in and finding out, okay, what other passions do they have, and how can they take that passion and move forward with it? What kind of a legacy do they want to leave? What kind of mark do they want to leave in their community and on their family and on the world and things like that? So there's a lot that goes into it. And again, it's looking at all of those different influencers on how they're showing up, right? Because it can be a very difficult transition for them, and they can, quite often get into some very catabolic energy, right? And start feeling sorry for themselves and things like that. For hockey players in particular, and for a lot of athletes, I mean, it's not, their retirement is not necessarily planned. It can be caused by an injury. They can be cut from a team. For National Hockey League players, the latest statistic I saw was NHL players. Their NHL career ends at the age of approximately 28.26. That's the average age So they're very young. They may go on to play in Europe and things like that, but it's very young age for them to transition out. So we look at all of that, and then we look at those core disciplines that we work with, right? So there's certain disciplines that we implement and work on and practice on a daily basis to move forward. So as you know, we're looking at awareness and acceptance and trusting the process and, confidence and fearlessness and being fully engaged and things like that. So it's quite a process, and again, very individual depending on the person's situation.
Nice, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And that's such a staggering statistic. It's something I wasn't aware of, that you think professional athletes, they're good till probably their mid 30s, early 40s, and it's interesting to hear that about NHL players. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tony's asking, what tips do you have for coaching youth?
Oh, great question, Tony. Love it. Can I just ask Tony, does he coach a particular sport?
Yes, and he coaches bowling.
Bowling. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, working with youth is a really interesting thing, and I think one of the things that we look at there is, again, there's lots of skills that can come into it, but it's understanding the discipline that's involved and ensuring that they don't get tied up in the fact that if they have a bad day, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person.
Okay. Right,
which is something that and depending on where you're coaching youth, Tony, it's difficult, right? Because you've got the influence of the parents as well. So when I'm working with younger athletes, I work with the parents, the coaches, and the athlete whenever possible, because it's such a key thing. So having them understand that they are somebody outside of bowling, so that's not their identity. I interviewed one gentleman who said, better people make better athletes. So making sure that they're well-rounded, making sure that, and I'm sure Tony, if you're listening and if you follow John at all, you have the same sort of an approach to things. The one thing that I find really difficult is when, and it happens still a lot in hockey, unfortunately, is when athletes are berated for their performance. So it's really looking at the effort that they've put in, what they're learning, having realistic goals for them, and always talking about, as John knows, talking about that road to the path to mastery. So what can we learn from what happened today? And they're going to have days where they perform well and days where they don't perform so well. And looking at those days, okay, so things didn't go so well today. What can we learn from this? What can we take from this? Yeah. And Tony, if you want to reach out, I'd love to set up a call, and we can chit chat a little bit more. So John's got my contact information.
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and put that up as well. In fact, let me just go ahead and because you've lit some people up. We got some questions coming through, which is great. Let me go ahead and put Susan's email up here. So if people do have a question or things like that, they can go ahead and ask that. Okay, and it's info@athletesgamechanger.com if they want to get in touch with you. Yeah. We've got a few more questions. You good for hanging on a little bit?
I sure am, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So Robert's weighing in. Robert is an athlete in two sports at a very, very high level, both bowling and football. And he just mentioned here about confidence is key, something I didn't have when I joined the PBA Tour 4 years ago. And then he goes on to talk about support systems in place, about how important they are, both building, a network of coaches and a network of friends to kind of carry them along the journey. How important is that for, what would you say, how important is that for athletes to have those kind of support systems in place?
Oh, Robert, I love that. It's so true. So that's actually part of my game plan as well. I call it our lineup. So it's that team of people that we're surrounded with and having that support. So whether it is, your coach, your skills coach for whatever sport, some people looking at sports nutritionists, whether they've got a massage therapist, having that group of people around you that are like-minded, that are cheering you on, teammates. the people that you're surrounded with is a huge, huge impact. And when I'm talking to younger athletes, we talk about that and who they're surrounding themselves with. And if they're surrounding themselves outside of sport with a bunch of guys that want to go hang out and drink beer on Friday night, and you're looking to be a professional athlete, you have to sort of decide, okay, is that the group of people that I want to be with, right, to spend my time with? So it's such a great point, Robert. I absolutely agree with you 100% on that.
Thanks. Stanley's asking, is there a time when you think about winning?
Ooh. Oh boy. Okay. So that's a loaded question.
It is. Yeah, I love it.
It really is a loaded question. And for athletes, that's what we've been raised on, right? I mean, it's all about winning. Mm-hmm. So going into a competition or a race or an event, I strongly suggest that that's not what you're focused on at that time. So there are times, so quick answer, visualization, great time to think about winning, right? Meditation, visualization, all of those things. That's a great time to see yourself doing that. When you get into that moment of the sport, if you can let all of that go and be present in the moment and don't be attached to that outcome. Mm-hmm. So, don't focus on, sure, you care about whether you win. I'm not saying don't care, but don't be attached to it when you're there competing, because the moment that you do that, then you're going to take away from that. But yeah, think about winning I think about, that when I visualize all the time.
Sure. Because, Stanley, we can visualize, throwing the shot to win a tournament. We can visualize, shooting 300 in our mind over and over again. In that moment, as Susan's mentioning, focusing more on the outcome may not be as beneficial as really focusing more on the process and owning and honoring your whole training leading up to that point to go ahead and make the shot that you need to.
Yeah, exactly, John. Yeah.
A quick little bowling story. And for those of our bowling friends that are watching, so last night, CBS Sports Network televised the finals of the United States Bowling Congress Queens Tournament. It's one of the major events on the ladies tour. And it's a very, very tough format to bowl because it's 15 games of qualifying. They cut the field to the top 64, and then you bowl double elimination match play, and the matches are 3-game matches. Total pins determines the winner.
Wow.
So long story, they get to the top 5, and the top seed has never lost a match in the entire tournament. But you get to the TV finals, which is a stepladder finals, and in theory, she could lose a 1-game match and lose the title. So Daria Kovalova, who is a Russian athlete who played for Wichita State, and she was the top seed for the tournament, and she ended up winning. And, got to that point in the 10th frame where she needed to get up and throw, she needed to throw a double. I think she had thrown a strike in the 9th, and then she needed the first one in the 10th to win. And you could see how she was just honoring her process and her technical program going into that moment. But in the interview afterward, the announcer, who is Kelly Kulick, says to her something like, Daria, you had mentioned that you didn't think you were like something like worthy or capable of being out here on tour. Now that you're a major champion, does it change your attitude? And in her personality, she just kind of looks at the mic and she goes, maybe. Right? I mean, there was, something kind of humble, but something kind of like, wow, you just won a major tournament. And she even said, she goes, I don't think this will hit me until after. And I thought that was such a great way of just acknowledging that you're in that moment of honoring your process, and you'll worry about all the other stuff later. So
yeah. Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah.
John, can I just throw one more thing into that? And I can't remember which popular question, but one of the other ones was, the other thing that's key is, I think, is gratitude.
Such a good point. Yeah. Tell us more.
Being grateful for where we are now, I think is really, really key. And if you notice when, you know, and this goes back to the teamwork as well, or the team, the lineup, the people that you're surrounded with. And when people win championships, or, you know, whatever, people are being interviewed after, athletes are being interviewed afterwards, they're always thanking the people, their coach, their family, right. So they're so grateful for those people that surround them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a good point. Absolutely. Michael's weighing in. He's asking, what's the best way to stay in the moment?
Ooh, yeah, Michael, that is, again, that's something we really have to practice. It's not something that that we can do easily. So a couple of things that I've had athletes that have found things work. So it can be depending on your sport, whether it's an individual sport or a team sport, but at practice, if you have a coach there, just having the coach, and I talk about this all the time, it's like, where are you? You know, where am I right now? Am I in the past, am I in the present, or am I in the future? So if you've got a coach that can kind of chime in every once in a while and check in on you, or have some sort of a reminder for yourself. So whether that's, you know, a bracelet, a timer, something that you know, you can remember, and it's having that awareness around it, I think makes a big difference as well. Mm-hmm. Just, you know, going in to practice, to game, whatever it is, having the awareness, and maybe it's a saying to yourself, you know, be here now, a mantra, or whatever it is, be in the moment. I'm here, whatever it is that you can say to yourself just over and over and over again. And the more we practice it, the easier it is. And I know, again, that's a really quick, you know, a quick way to try to answer a really deep question. Yeah. But again, feel free to reach out if you'd like some more information. And I've also got a athlete's mindset shift available on the website, and that does talk about being present in the moment as well. There's three tips there, so you can just sign up for that and get access to that.
Right. So let's put your website up here. So you can go to athletesgamechanger.com, and Susan does have a free resource for you that's available there as well. I've got it. I love it. So definitely, to anybody else, please go ahead and check that out. I think that can be a valuable resource. And certainly, regardless of whatever sport it is that you're playing, certainly hiring or working with a performance coach can be something to help you look at playing your sport a little bit differently. And Susan, we had talked in the podcast that you interviewed, but I mean, I'm very grateful for my coaches I work with, and I've worked with them for several years type thing, because we know it's a journey. So if you're certainly curious about working with someone, especially Susan at this point, you know, drop her an email at info@athletesgamechanger.com and start a conversation with her and see how she can help. I mean, one of the best things about any good performance coach is they're going to be able to work with people from a variety of sports, because they're dealing with the mental process behind that. And so I highly recommend Susan, and hope you will all reach out as well. So Susan, we're kind of wrapping up here. So as we do, if there's like one big takeaway that you want to leave with everybody for today, what would that be?
So the one thing I think that I would like to say is, really don't let anyone, and I mean anyone, including yourself, limit what you're capable of. Right? We have so much potential, so much untapped potential that we don't even realize. And, you know, maybe you've got somebody in your life that says you can't do it, or maybe it's a limitation that you've got yourself, that you're thinking that you can't do something. It's BS. Go for it. You can do it.
Yeah.
And I'll cheer you on. Let me know what it is, and I'll cheer you on.
Awesome. Susan, thank you so much for your time today, and your expertise and your wisdom, and sharing your story with us, and how you help your athletes show up more professionally and energetically. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, John. It was an absolute pleasure.
Same. Everybody that's been hanging out today, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Give it a like, leave a comment, something like that, and we will be back with more stuff next week. So until then, have a great rest of the day. We'll see you real soon. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.